Welcome to the show discussing problems and issues of health with Dr. Alcena. For this segment of the show, I'm going to continue to talk about high cholesterol. When I left off last week, I went into the treatment of high cholesterol. I'm going to repeat that again in this segment. But again, for those who hadn't heard the show, I want to explain to you that high cholesterol is a very serious medical problem that causes a lot of complications to the brain, to the heart, to the kidney, to the eyes, etc. Very common problem because when the cholesterol is high, inevitably it's going to wind up causing plaques to develop in the arteries throughout the body. And then once the arteries have plaques in them, then the plaques can lead to narrowing of these arteries, which can prevent blood from flowing freely, resulting in ischemia of the organs that this vessel is supposed to carry blood to. So once you have elevated cholesterol, it is not just elevated cholesterol, it's the entire lipid profile when we order these tests, which means that the total cholesterol will be elevated by itself and together with the LDL cholesterol. And then we also take a look at the HDL. If the HDL is normal, that's good. If the HDL is high, that's even better. However, if the total cholesterol and the LDLs are elevated, and also the triglyceride is elevated, that's type 2 hyperlipidemia. If the triglyceride is extremely high, and the cholesterol is normal, that's type 3 hyperlipidemia, so on and so forth. It's very problematic. So what you have to understand is the fact that when you are treating these things, what it is that you are doing. Well, what you're doing is a substance all of us in the human have in our blood called coenzyme A. That's the short version, as it the actual name is hydroxymethyl glutaryl coenzyme A reductase. So I call it coenzyme A. What is this all about? Well, in order for you to have high cholesterol, you have to have inherited a gene from either one parent or two parents. If it's from one parent, you're heterozygous. If it's from both parents, you're homozygous. What is that gene? That gene is located on the long arm of chromosome 5. That's where it's located. And then that then leads to the situation where the coenzyme A is become overactivated. That's the abnormality. But the abnormality the genetic abnormality is located in the long arm of chromosome 5. That then results in the individual having overactivation of coenzyme A. Coenzyme A is there to do one thing and one thing only as it relates to cholesterol, is to get the cholesterol level increase. Okay, overactivation causes the level to be higher. So when we treat patients with statin, and I give you the list, and I'll repeat the list again in a little bit, what the statin does, it blocks the activity of the coenzyme A. In so doing, the cholesterol does not get piled up in the circulation. It gets routed into the liver. The liver then get it mixed up with the bile, and then the bile get taken it out into the stool, and the stool take it out of the system that way. That's how we get rid of the cholesterol. So a diet plays a major role in the treatment and management on cholesterol. But the diet doesn't cause the cholesterol elevation. It can make it worse. It could make it better if you do the right diet. What's the right diet? Well, of all the stuff that you see on television and all the hoopla and all the billions of dollars that are being made, which is fine. This is America. Problem is, the bottom line is a good diet is a diet that has high protein, okay, and it has low, simple carbohydrate. What is simple carbohydrate? Simple carbohydrate is basically a classic example is sugar. Everything that's at good old-fashioned sugar, that's simple carbohydrate. And of course, food with simple sugars are all over the place. And we need simple carbohydrate ourselves, even though our cholesterol may or may not be high, because we need a simple carbohydrate in order to provide energy for the body for us to survive. However, when you eat too much of it, too much of this simple carbohydrate, by necessity, some of it must go to the liver because it's too much. The body can't handle it. The percentage that goes to the liver doesn't just sit in the liver. The liver breaks it down, metabolizes it, and then it is metabolized into fat. Okay, and the fat then get distributed to the soft tissues, and the individual becomes obese, and the rest of it, unfortunately, sits right there in the liver, and that's not a good thing, because when it sits right there in the liver, it must by necessity degrade. Everything that sits there cannot just sit there; it has to degrade, and as it is degrading, it's going to release free radical. Everything that sits there that is degrading must by necessity produce free radical. And free radical is a precursor of inflammatory processes. That's what damages the liver and or the tissue where this stuff is sitting there. Okay? So now you understand the mechanism. Okay? Now, when you eat complex carbohydrate, on the other hand, I gave an example last week. A classic example would be something we're very familiar with, like pasta or spaghetti. You cannot get fat from those. You cannot get hurt from those. Those are complex carbohydrates. You say, well, how so? Well, when you eat complex carbohydrate, two things happen. Number one, you satisfy hunger, which is very important. And number two, you release a little bit of free energy out of it. Short-term free energy. You get a little bit of free energy out of the complex carbohydrate, and then you, of course, satisfy your hunger. Because the human body was not created by God physiologically to be able to break down the complex carbohydrate in the same way as it does the simple carbohydrate. So therefore, the complex carbohydrate, now, if you prepare the pasta with something that is too rich in simple carb or too much fat, too much other stuff, then that can hurt you, yes. But the carbohydrate itself cannot do anything to damage you. You understand that? And the list of complex carbohydrates is quite long. You know, brown rice, brown bread, plantain, yam, and so on and so forth. You know, potatoes. All these things are good food that will not make you fat. They can't. For them to make you fat, they have to be broken down to the finite. That cannot happen. We don't have that ability as humans to do that. So therefore, complex carbohydrate is fine. Okay. Simple carbohydrate, you got to be very careful. This huge book that's sitting in front of me, oh my goodness, The Art and Practice of Modern Clinical Medicine that I wrote in 2016, 156 chapters. There are two huge chapters there. One dealing with obesity, that explains the whole thing, and then one that deals with high cholesterol, again explain the whole thing. Another one that deals with diabetes also explain the whole thing, because it lists all the simple carbohydrate foods for you, and it lists and also lists all the complex carbohydrate food for you that we're familiar with in this part of the world, that you can get your hand on, you could buy, etc., or grow in your own farm or whatever, garden or whatever you want. So therefore, then, this whole hoopla that you hear about this diet, this diet, that. The bottom line, a good diet is one that has high protein, low fat, low simple carbohydrate, and low salt. That's what a good diet. You could do whatever you want with it. If you want to sell it that's your business. I wrote a book in 1992 about diet. People copied that thing up and down. It didn't matter to me. I didn't care. What do I care? I don't write book to make money. I write book to make academic contribution. It's a little book. There must be a copy of it somewhere in the studio here. Okay, third world diet, whatever the hell I call it. The fact, suffice it to say, that's what a good diet is. Okay, now. So therefore, then, when we treat cholesterol, the idea is to block the coenzyme A, as I just stated, so that it doesn't cause us to overabsorb the cholesterol. Now, to help us to deal with that when the cholesterol is very high, we have a list of medication that we call statin. That when we take them, they're going to block the coenzyme A, preventing it from causing us to overabsorb. At least some of them. You have Zocor, Lipitor, Lescol, Mevacor, Crestor, Pravastatin, Levalo, and a whole bunch of. There's something new out there called Repata, whatever. That's for the cholesterol. Then for the triglyceride, which is a different part of the fat, we have Lopid, we have Tricor, cholestyramine, and so on and so forth. These are basically resin that grab onto the fat and take it out of the system. Okay, that's also genetically transmitted. All right, so now that you understand what it is we do that in combination with the diet. As I stated, diet doesn't cause high cholesterol, but it can make it worse. Okay. Now that we've used those medication, you must know, as I stated last week, you cannot take this medication during the morning hour or during the daytime. These medications must be taken after dinner, half hour after dinner, or at bedtime. You say, but how come? Well, the human body is a fascinating machine. The way God created it allow us to have certain substance in our body is higher in the morning, or certain substances are higher at night. Well, fat to be one of those substances, not only that it's highest after we eat, but it's also naturally higher in our bloodstream at nighttime. So in common sense then, you want to block the fat when there's the highest level of fat to block, namely nighttime. Okay? And I gave a classic example to try to make the point last week. Why is it that most heart attack occurs in the morning hours, in particular Monday morning? Well, the reason is because when we go to sleep at night, the body must get must be prepared for the day's work that's coming in and the next day. So therefore, as the physiology works out, is so that we have the highest level of adrenaline that we naturally secrete in the morning hours, starting at 3 o'clock in the morning. Between 3 and 5 in the morning, that's when we secrete a high level of, naturally, that's when we secrete this high level of adrenaline, so that the physiology of the body is preparing itself for the day's work that's coming. Well, if you have an underlying heart problem, namely occlusive disease or some other form of disease that causes the heart to be very weak, what's going to happen when you're secreting this high level of adrenaline? The heart is going to be whipped up and can't handle it, because the level of adrenaline will overstimulate the heart. It is the overstimulation of the heart that is already sick that causes the heart attack to occur, or the cardiac arrhythmia to occur, and so on and so forth. Because high adrenaline can also cause rhythm abnormalities. That is why there's certain medication, in particular some beta blockers, that we use that has that's lasts throughout the night up until morning in the body. It has a 24 hours cycle. You take it in the morning, it's there until the next morning, until it wears off. So therefore that covers that hours from 3 to 5 in the morning when the level of adrenaline is very high. And those are a specific type of cardiac medication. We call them beta blockers. Not all, but some beta blockers are long-acting. They are made in particular to prevent the overstimulation of the heart throughout the day, as well as when the morning hours is loaded with adrenaline, namely 3 to 5 in the morning. So now you understand why most heart attack occurs in the morning, and more so Monday morning. Why Monday morning? Well, people are getting ready to go to work. They were off for the weekend, and they're getting ready to go to work Monday morning. They're very anxious. Yeah, they're sleeping, but they're anxious. And then the more anxious they are, the more they secrete adrenaline. And the more they secrete adrenaline, superimposed on the weak heart, the more the heart is going to get into trouble. Okay, so now that you understand that. So now, what else do we do besides diet and those pills that I just list for you? Well, interesting conversation has to be started. Namely, let's take a look at the vessels, okay? In particular, in the high flow, the arterial flow system. The cholesterol doesn't just sit there without doing any damage. It's going to cause damage. And the damage it's going to cause is related to plaque formation. How about that? Well, you can't begin the process of plaque formation without first started with an inflammatory process. How about that? So one of the best medication we have available to us in the world to prevent inflammatory processes from developing happens to be aspirin. Okay? But you got to be very super careful before you take aspirin. Aspirin is fantastic. I don't think there's a single medication that has ever been created that is more fantastic than aspirin because it has so many different usage. So, but you got to be careful because there are many contraindications to taking aspirin. That's for you and your healthcare professionals to tell you about. I'll give you a hint. There's a disease called von Willebrand disease, which is a qualitative platelet abnormality. When you take aspirin, basically what you are doing, you are giving yourself man-made von Willebrand disease. Because what happened, what the aspirin does, is that the aspirin is going to prevent the platelet in your circulation from aggregating. From 7 to 10 days, take one single baby aspirin. For 7 to 10 days, the platelet in your circulation has been made qualitatively abnormal. They can't aggregate properly, therefore a clot will not form properly. 7 to 10 days. This is how powerful one baby aspirin is. Why am I making that point? In addition to the fact that if you have ulcers of your stomach, you have problem with your esophagus, you got problem with your liver. I mean, the list of contraindication to not taking aspirin is really quite long, super long. But that's for your doctors, your healthcare professional to sit down and explain these things to you carefully so that you understand. You just don't go and start popping aspirin on your own, or for that matter, popping NSAID on your own just because you have aches and pain, okay, or because you want to take aspirin because you hear it's good for you, okay. You must make sure that you don't have von Willebrand disease, which is a hereditary qualitative platelet abnormality. Quite common. More than 3.2 plus million people in this country have it. 1%. We have what? 227 million folks in this country. And this, according to the latest stat, so 1% of that have that. The same thing applies to the world. You have about 1% of the world suffer from von Willebrand. Well, you have 7+ million people in the world, so that's 7.7 million. So that would give you an idea. You have some 77 million people, therefore, in the world that have von Willebrand. This is very common stuff. Okay. On top of that, unknown to you, there's a disease called hemophilia. How about that? But hemophilia A can develop spontaneously during lifetime without you knowing anything about it. So hemophilia, therefore, not only that, if you knew about it, it's a very bad disease. If you were born with it ever since infancy, you got problem. You're sick. However, unknown to you, there's a significant percentage of individuals who develop hemophilia spontaneously during lifetime. They know nothing about it until something happened and they started bleeding and you can't stop the bleeding. Then you screen them, you find, oh my God, they have hemophilia. Okay. And I can go on and give you other examples. For instance, you cannot have end-stage renal disease and without having qualitative platelet problem. How about that? If you have chronic kidney disease, there are certain substances that the kidney need to clear out. Well, if the kidney is sick, the kidney cannot clear that out, cannot clear these things out. I mean, I hate to hit you over the head with all this academic stuff, but this is real practical stuff that if you are practicing frontline medicine, you better know this stuff and you better tell it to your patients. Otherwise, you can get yourself into trouble. Okay? You have renal insufficiency, significant renal insufficiency, or for that matter, end-stage renal disease, you're on dialysis, whatever. You just can't pop aspirin. Because why? Because as I just finished telling you, your platelets are coated with material that the kidney is incapable of cleansing out. So therefore, the coating of the platelet with this stuff gives you automatically qualitative platelet abnormality. Your platelet will not aggregate properly. These are you haven't even taken aspirin yet. I'm telling you all the things that can happen to you. If you have liver problem, you have liver disease of one type or another, and I'm telling you, liver disease is extremely common throughout the world. You have liver disease. The fact that you have liver disease, the same thing happened. There's certain things that's happening to your liver that's preventing platelet from being uncoated by stuff that's make them qualitatively abnormal. Because of that, when the liver is sick, the liver is not capable of clearing out this protein-like material, and then they coated the platelet, automatically the platelet become qualitatively abnormal. All those things I just mentioned to you, and hundreds more, can represent contraindication to take an aspirin. Okay? So for instance, suppose you have ITP. A lot of people walking out with ITP. You have ITP, you have low platelet for life unless you get treated. You don't know that you have ITP because unless your platelet is so low that you start bruising or start bleeding spontaneously, you don't know that. But aspirin is contraindicated. This business about clinical medicine, it is fascinating. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also extremely complicated. So now that I've scared you to tell you all the bad things about aspirin, let me tell you about some of the good things about aspirin, okay? It is a fantastic medication because I'm talking about cholesterol. Let's stick with the cholesterol part. There are dozens of stuff that aspirin does I will not get into with you, but let's stick with the cholesterol part. So when you take the baby aspirin, why is it that I keep talking about baby aspirin? There's a reason for that. The baby aspirin has 81 milligrams. The regular aspirin that you use has 225 milligrams. The last thing you want to do, the absolute last thing you want to do, is to take that 225 milligram aspirin when you're talking about coronary occlusive disease. That's the last thing you want to do. The first thing you want to do, if you are cleared by your doctor to take aspirin, is the 81 milligram. What's the big difference? It's a huge difference because let me explain to you how aspirin works to prevent platelet aggregation so you understand what I'm talking about. There's a substance called thromboxane A2. That is what the aspirin is going to attack inside the platelet to prevent the platelet from aggregating. However, when you're attacking the thromboxane A2, by necessity, you're automatically releasing a whole list of vasoconstrictive material that cause vasoconstriction. As soon as you take the aspirin, you block the production of platelet. To do that, you must attack thromboxane A2. When you attack thromboxane A2, you are releasing a whole long list of junk. All of them have vasoconstriction. What's the point I'm making? Well, you want to prevent platelet aggregation, but we also have a substance we're all born with. We call prostacyclin. That's a God-given vasodilator that is inside our vessel to keep the vessel dilated. Prostacyclin. How about that? However, when you take 81 milligram of aspirin, the natural vasodilator, the prostacyclin, is not negatively affected. It remains active. It's keeping the vessel open. You're not just giving the aspirin to prevent the clot, but you also has the responsibility to make sure the vessel stays open. Because if the vessel closed acutely, bingo, you got a heart attack. Bingo, you have a stroke. So what is the point in giving 225 milligram of aspirin when 81 will do it? What the 225 milligram aspirin does, the more aspirin you give, the more you attack thromboxane A2, the more you release this vasoconstrictive material, which then completely wipe out the effect of prostacyclin, rendering the vessel like that shut down. So you prevent the aspirin from aggregating. So that's beautiful. It ain't beautiful. It is ugly. Why? Because you also didn't realize that you're doing something bad to the vessel. So what is the sense? You have nothing. You have zero to gain by giving somebody 225 milligram aspirin when 81 milligram of aspirin can do the job just as well, and yet you're still preserving the vasodilatory effect of your vessel. How about that? Okay, and then you show up in the ER, as I have been as a patient several times. The first thing they're going to give you, they hook you up to a bottle of normal saline. They give you two, not only one 25 milligram, give you two of them to pop to drink. How about that? Okay, one of the radiology friend of mine gave me this. This is an ugly joke. He was working in his house. He broke his hand. So he showed up as an unnamed hospital in Westchester. I wouldn't even name the town. He's a radiologist. All he wanted is an X-ray to prove the fact that he broke his hand for sure. They give him a bottle of normal saline and they give him two aspirin to say. The guy said, I don't need to. I just come here to have an X-ray. And I don't want to order it myself, even though he could. He's got a license. He was being given two aspirin and a bottle of normal saline. He revolted against it. You can't make this up, okay? This is crazy. I mean, it's no joke. This is what's going on, okay? Now, there are instances where you could use two aspirin. Sure, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, using it to relieve the pain. If a lady is having menstrual pain, the uterus is contracting, she could take two aspirin because aspirin can bring out fever. It could also, it's a painkiller. So if you're using for a pain-killing medication, that's a different concept. Has nothing to do with preventing stroke or preventing heart attack. Because the more aspirin you give, the more you're going to hurt the patient, the more you're going to cause bleeding and so on and so forth. And what is sad about this, I do not have a monopoly to this information, my friend. It's in the literature. Not only I write about it, hundreds of other people write about it. So what is going on here? The information is out there, all over the internet, all over the medical school, all over the books. So why isn't it being used? You go and figure this out, okay? I, as a patient, I've been a patient many times. That's why I advocate for patients, not only as a physician, which is my job to do, but also I have also been a patient. And I'll continue to fight for patients until the day I start practicing, and I couldn't care less what people say or do because they can't touch me. Listen, I'm going to stop here. Next week, I'll continue to talk more about high cholesterol. Until such time, keep watching the show. See Dr. Alcena saying so long and bye-bye.